Welcome back to the Messy Reformation. My name's Jason Rice. I'm the lead pastor at Faith Community CRC in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. My co-host is Willie Cronky. He's a member at Pease CRC in Pease, Minnesota. We're just a couple of guys who love the Christian Reformed Church and want to see Reformation happen in our denomination. But we realize that whenever Reformation happens in the history of the church, things get messy. And as we prepare for Synod 2024, things continue to get messy. So we're taking the opportunity to have conversations with pastors throughout the Christian Reformed Church to find out what's going on in our denomination, but also to talk about what Reformation might look like. If you haven't already, take a moment, click subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're dropping episodes every single Sunday evening. It's also important for you to know that you are our marketing plan. We rely on you to spread the word about what we're doing at the Messy Reformation. We rely on you to share our content. We also rely on you to give us 5-star reviews and provide good feedback for this podcast so that the algorithms put out our content further into the world. You are our marketing plan, and we believe we've placed our marketing in good hands. You can also support us financially on Patreon or Substack. All of the money raised is used to further the mission and the platform of the Messy Reformation. With all that said, we're going to get to this week's episode, which is part 1 of our Synod 2024 recap with Dan DeGraff. Well, we are thankful to be back at the Messy Reformation, doing some interviews, talking with some pastors from the Christian Reformed Church, and we're excited this week to bring back on our very own Dan DeGraff. After he served well as an officer at Synod, we gave him about a week to recover, and now we said, you got to put you back to work. And so, Dan, we're thankful to have you back on the podcast. I guess the first thing is, what did you do for the last week to try to, or what have you been doing to try to recover from the work of Synod 2024?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me back on and for giving me that week. I went on vacation. I went down to Kentucky with my family and my in-laws, and Thursday afternoon after Synod got over, we went out to Sandy Pines. For those in Michigan, they probably know about Sandy Pines, a little mobile home resort area, and I slept for 2 hours. So instantly crashed and took multiple naps in the days ahead. But yeah, I got to go around to the Ark and Creation Museum, did some time in the Red River Gorge, which is just a beautiful world-class climbing spot. I didn't do any climbing, but doing some hiking and sightseeing, and just spending some time with family. And I do feel rested now, and finally got back to Baldwin last night. So all good.
Awesome. I know, like, even for me, and I never served as an officer, and I think the officer serving as an officer has an extra level of burden sitting on your shoulders. I served on a significant advisory committee, but I know that after that, it took me at least a couple of weeks to really, I felt better after a week, but it even took me a few more weeks until I felt like I was back to 100%. So do you feel like you're still trying to get your feet back under you a little bit?
I'm getting there. Yeah. I mean, just starting up work this morning, you'd definitely be like, all right, I've been out of the office for 2.5 weeks. And so that's long enough for stuff to build up. And thankfully it's the summer. So it is a slower season out here, but still, it'll take some time. I don't know how to write a sermon anymore. So that'll be lovely.
I want to, this isn't the point of the podcast, but I do want to say it's this weird thing, isn't it? So I've been preaching weekly for 17 years now. And still every week I have this weird feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. Isn't that weird? And then I've told people, so I have this really regular rhythm of preparing for my sermon, and I write my sermon on Thursday typically, and I don't even look at it Friday, and I don't look at it Saturday, and I pull it out Saturday night and start working on it for Sunday. And every week I get ready to go through my sermon Saturday night, and I have this fear come over me, I don't remember what I wrote. I don't know what my sermon is. Am I going to be able to preach? And it's so funny. And then you start going through it, you remember it. But every week you have this I think I forgot how to preach already.
Yeah. And even this week, I think I am technically doing a text I've preached on before, and I do try to set myself up for that after Synod, after classes meetings, and saying, oh yeah, it'll be an easy week coming back, and then you're like, man, that was trash. It doesn't work for this week, so I'm sure it'll be rewriting something completely new. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I know a lot of pastors do this, and I'm not even ripping on any pastors that repreach sermons. I just can't, because I re-look at my sermon and I'm like, I have to. Maybe some points will come over again, but for the most part, I don't repreach it, because every time I have this theory in my mind that Spurgeon said, like, pastors should keep their old sermons to weep over them. And every time I read one of my old sermons, I'm kind of like, yeah, we need to do better.
To your point, actually, I heard Al Mohler say, this was like over 10 years ago at the Shepherds Conference. He was asked if he had the option to repreach a sermon, basically pull out an old one and repreach it. He said, I could, but I wouldn't. He said, every single time I will rewrite the notes, and I will actually give the congregation something that the Spirit has been leading to me now. So I think there's actually wisdom in that.
Yeah, but there is a benefit, I think, even just what Dan was saying. Preaching on a text that you've already preached before, there's a groundwork and a foundation already laid there that you can kind of build on each time. And so, like right now, back when Willie and I were doing youth ministry together, I preached through the Gospel of John with our youth group. And now I'm preaching through the Gospel of John again with our congregation. And I'm still having to do a ton of study, but there's some concepts and things that are already have processed in my brain. So you're connecting the dots. And actually what it has helped me do, I think, is help take our congregation deeper into the text, because I understand it a little bit more and how to communicate it. So it does help you to kind of repreach through things. But this isn't a preaching podcast. We're wanting to kind of reflect on Synod 2024 and what, each Synod, people have said, like Synod 2022, people were saying, wow, this was a monumental Synod. Something changed. And then Synod 2023, people said, wow, this is a big Synod. But now, I think after 2024, many people are looking at it saying, this is a historic Synod. There was some massive decisions made, and some, the CRC decided to kind of rechart our course forward, or maybe not rechart, but get back on the path that we've been on, that we want to be on or have been on for decades. And so people kind of knew that there was the possibility of there being this kind of a historic Synod. And so I guess I want to ask, what went through your mind, Dan, as you were elected to be one of the officers at a Synod that you knew was potentially going to be a historic Synod?
Well, and before you answer that question, I want to ask, what possessed you to let your name stand?
Oh, man. I don't think, and I think I'm still wrestling with just how historic it was. There were times where Josh Christoffels, the first clerk, and I just kind of stepped back, and we were like, this isn't even hitting us. This isn't even hitting the delegates of what we've done, what they've done. I allowed my name to stand. This is my third Synod, and so I feel like I know the ropes a little bit. I love administrative stuff. And that was the main thing. I'm like, this is great. When I met with my advisory committee online that I got a little bit of work with during the week of Synod, I showed off my copy of the agenda. I had it all tabbed up. That's what I love to do. I wanted to be organized, wanted to know, be able to have a visible way of seeing, like, this is what we've covered so far as we go throughout the week. And so, yeah, I was excited to do it. Grateful, really, to be trusted by so many pastors and elders and deacons to do this kind of work. I joked with my congregation saying, I just get to look pretty. That's all I'm up there for, and so I'll be a failure. But no, that I don't think I didn't know too much of what the clerk actually did. I just thought, oh yeah, the title clerk, that's administrative, that's right up my alley. And so that's all I had going in. And so, yeah, I'll keep going, like, to get into the week. Even before we met, there were a ton of Zoom meetings at the officers, not a ton, but there was a lot of hours spent in Zoom meetings with the officers and General Secretary Zach King and the Associate Director of Synodical Services. Now he was the interim, but Joel Vanderwerken, just seeing the amount of work that was ahead of us, and to think about, how Synod ended last year, and hoping that we weren't going to repeat, kind of a disastrous ending. It doesn't matter what angle you're coming at Synod from. Last year, everyone knew just ended in a really bad way. So, I mean, it was heavy on us as officers from the get-go of like, wow, there's a lot to cover. Each of us comes from different parts of the U.S., different parts of the Christian Reformed Church. And so we sort of knew kind of what to expect from different people, and yet you still don't know how it's going to go until it actually is happening on the floor. And so, yeah, it hit us. I would say it hit me, at least. I think I could speak for the other officers too. It hit us as we were getting ready between the election of officers to actually being in Grand Rapids, that like, wow, this is going to be a heavy task.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but it seems like it would be wisdom for us moving forward as a denomination to elect the officers 2 weeks before Synod, to give them that time to prepare, to lead well, because you can tell a massive difference in having that 2 weeks to be able to know, all right, we're the officers, and so we're going to prepare to do this job and do it well. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think, someone said it jokingly a few years ago when I was at Synod, like, the only benefit to knowing who's going to be the officers ahead of time is they'll get to pack, fancier, more formal clothes. They'll have their sports coat along, and they didn't know they were going to be up there in front. But seriously, we did this in 22 when I was there. Now we did it this year, and to have that time to prepare, actually to wrap your mind around all of the material that's coming, just to develop a rapport. I mean, all the officers knew of each other a little bit heading into Synod, and I think that allowed us to work together with trust. But yeah, to imagine, again, last year or even preceding Synods where it's literally like, hey, you get to figure things out right now that you didn't know for sure you were going to be doing, just seems insane. So yeah, I think definitely my hope is that in the future they continue to do this. Yeah.
No, that's very good. And Dan, thanks for your service, and you did a wonderful job along with all the other officers. And I'm kind of wondering, for the most part, the officers that are kind of up front, up close and personal the most are the president and the vice president. Nobody talks and thinks as much about the clerks. So I'm actually wondering if you could give us some perspective. What are the duties of the clerks? Because it seems like a very behind the scenes role that's taken for granted that I don't think should be.
Yeah, so my dad, when I was home the last couple of days as we went through Indiana, my dad goes, "Yeah, we turned it on and you were just giving stuff away. Like, is that what you did, really?" And I keep saying, I had some really good throws of some Calvin University socks on the final morning, but that's not the point. The clerks are in charge of maintaining the electronic roll call, speaker queue, yes, no voting. Just making sure that that's all going right. At this Synod, and I think at most synods, we're situated the closest to the synodical services table and personnel. And so if there is a message for the president or vice president, either Josh or myself, the first clerk, second clerk, are getting that message to relay to them, which is really important, whether it's a procedural thing, whether it's just a scheduling type thing or some other type of message. The president and the vice president, so here's what I'll say. The president and vice president, they are operating with the information that's immediately coming in from the floor. If someone needs to talk and wants to do something, they're going right to them. The hard part, for instance, when Josh Christoffels gets called on as first clerk with a chair challenge, because Derek's out of the chair already, Steven's leading. The hard part for a clerk is you're so focused on clerk duties that you're not really following along, whereas the vice president is always following along with the discussion on the floor. And so honestly, like, part of it for me is as I reread what we did, I'm like, I completely missed that. So our duties are much more the administrative pieces, but also speaking into, if we have expertise or knowledge in church order and parliamentary procedure, we're able to give that input. One of the things that different officers could operate in different ways, but one of the things that I think we understood is that the officers are not a democracy, and so it didn't. Derek and Stephen both, right, were very welcoming to things that Josh and I had to say. Derek was welcoming to things that Stephen had to say. But we didn't come in with any preconceived notion that, like, oh, if three of us think one way, one of us thinks the other, that, oh, this is how it's going to go. But our opinions were valued, but a lot of it is that more just making sure things are running smoothly so that the president can literally look over at a monitor screen next to him and say, okay, this is who's next, and announce that.
Yeah.
Oh, and then we get to review the minutes. So I've already read all of the minutes for this year, which is just such great fun. The job was not done at 9:00 when Synod, went to bed. There was at least one night where I was up till I think 12:30, just looking through minutes from the day and reviewing them. And so yeah, that thankfully there's also a minutes review committee. So Luann Sankey and Henry Cranenberg, who both served as past clerks, were part of that too, and so I'll give them credit as well for doing that work. But there's a lot of behind the scenes work that specifically the clerks are involved in that is not the most fun stuff.
Yeah. What do you think was the most surprising to you in stepping into your role as a clerk, or just in general being an officer? What weren't you expecting about serving in that role?
I think just how heavy the week was, and the fact that after going to two synods as a delegate, I mean, you can socialize quite easily with other delegates. And we got to socialize with different people. Again, we're socializing with the leaders of the denomination and its ministries. Every dinner except the last night, we were with a different group, and so we'd meet with the Korean delegates. We got to meet with young adult delegates or representatives. Ethnic advisors, our ecumenical delegates, and those were incredible opportunities. I didn't expect that really coming in. I knew they were on the schedule once I had seen it, but there is a sense of loneliness. You're trying to do things in a certain way. You're trying to get the work done, and you're not able to fully be involved with every single minutia of what's coming on the floor through motions and recommendations, and it made for a completely different experience that I didn't expect.
Yeah, and I talked about that. That was my experience last year, just chairing a pretty significant committee with a lot of work and obviously a lot of intrigue around what we were talking about. So you had people pulling at you all the time, trying to get your ear. You had people, and so you were just kind of like, I kind of isolated myself to just so I had people who, so people would stop like trying to politic me into doing different things, right? And so you just kind of
politicking is real. People should know politicking is real.
Absolutely.
Big time, and it happens at Synod way more. And so I didn't realize how much that happened until I was chairing a significant committee where I had people really they're tugging at you all the time, trying to do things, and so. It's pretty wild. And so you do kind of isolate yourself and you do feel kind of lonely. You don't have many people to talk to. And so, that's a real thing. It's something I want people to know, just moving forward, recognize that about officers and chairs, that, it's a naturally kind of lonely position there. And I'm thankful I had the opportunity to serve in that way. And I'm sure you're thankful
Absolutely.
for the opportunity to serve there too, but it is just kind of one of the, drawbacks of the job and the calling that you have at Synod that particular year.
Yeah, from being a Synod junkie, like I think that's what I would consider myself. I watched it for I don't know, since seminary, so over 10 years. I have no desire to go back next year. I think it'll be very different from this year, but I have no desire to return. And maybe that'll change as we go forward. But I am just like, yep, someone else can go. That's and that's part of how weighty it was. That's part of how historic a Synod it was. Like, all right, I'll take a break now. I've gone to the last 3 years and I'm good. So
and I've been telling people, and I found a lot of joy in it because I didn't go this year, and there was a lot of questioning about whether I was going to go to help kind of finish the work. And I've said this, I was disappointed at first that I wasn't going, and I had a few people kind of yell at me like, you should have made sure that you went. I'm like, well, it doesn't really work that way. But I've told people the longer I wrestled through it, I recognize like it'll actually be better if I don't go and things passed better without me there, right? Like the gravamen came out with a unified report, but I wasn't able to get that work done last year, right? And so like the fact that these things went on and the things passed even stronger this year without all of us there shows that this isn't a one-man show. It's not a two-man show. This is the movement of God in the Christian Reformed Church. And so and I keep saying this, but anybody calling this a coup or anything like that, they need to shut their mouth, because there's no way that this could happen. And it's not the same. It's different people every year and the same trajectories heading forward. And so it's actually better. I sat back with so much joy, like watching Andy Seitzema lead that committee on gravamen from the floor. And I thought, he's a better man for the job than me. I think the work that we did last year laid a lot of groundwork. It was really gratifying to know that all the work we did last year wasn't a waste of time, but in God's providence, he put Andy Seitzema there to be the guy to lead that committee and to be able to answer questions on the floor. It's such a great job that, God put him there for such a time as this.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be careful. Obviously, I mean, we reminded the delegates intentionally on the last day, like, be careful. What happens in advisory committees is confidential. But as an officer, you get to see a little bit more behind the scenes of how the committee work is progressing. And I do think, I won't tear down your work at all from 2023. But just, the work that Andy and that Peter Kornilov were doing was just excellent in how they were guiding that committee. And so, so nothing against you, Jason, but they did really well this year.
Well, and I don't take offense to that. I was talking to Laura Copley after Synod too, and she was like, I didn't realize until this year the absolutely unmanageable amount of work that they gave your committee last year, because we had all of, what was this year's committee 9 and 8 and even parts of 2 were all given to my committee, right? So that's why we were working. And I told a few people, I said, I remember feeling last year, even with gravamen, I remember feeling if we could take another day, we could probably get a unified report out of my committee. I felt that, but we just ran out of time. We couldn't. We had to get something to, and so I feel no shame, and I'm not even trying to justify my work. I know that like we had so much because we had all of the discipline stuff and the gravamen last year, and so it was a pretty brutal workload. But thanks be to God and His providence, it all came through this year, and I'm very excited about the work that was done at Synod, and think we kind of changed the trajectory. And I don't want to say changed the trajectory. I want to say like we're back on the trajectory that we were on maybe 50 years ago. We're heading in the direction that is more honoring to God.
Yeah, I think, it's hard as we've, and as other guests have talked about too. And if you take the CRC history class at Calvin Seminary, that what has led us to this point is part of a movement that's been going on for 60, 70 years now. As we think about relationships to the Presbyterian Church in America as well. And, J. Gresham Machen, as Dave Bosher so lovingly called out the Machen's war children of the OPC at Synod on the floor. That was wonderful. But, he saw the liberalism of American Christianity and of the American church. And, the CRC wasn't completely wrapped up in that, but a few decades after the 20s, we began to see some of that in a different way. And so I think, given what happened in the 90s with women in office and the split that we went through with the URC and even churches that were wrestling and leaving prior to 94, 95, 96, you have you have part of the denomination thinking, okay, this is what, again, as we hear, reformed and always reforming, and it stops right there. Like there's a big part, or a strong enough part, I'll say, a weighty enough part of our denomination that says, yeah, we reformed, and we view things, we want to think deeply and widely, but it's really left behind a lot of pastors and a lot of congregations saying, no, the Word of God has always said what it says, and they have quietly continued and persevered and risen up leaders that don't get the high positions in the denomination, but they have been out there. And so yeah, I don't think we can say like we changed the trajectory, but I think this is just the quiet development of fruit that has been growing for decades now. And finally, again, by God's providence, everything aligned to say, no, this is what the church is supposed to be about. This is what our faith, this is what our confessions mean. This is what it means to be a confessional church. And by no means have we got it all figured out. Again, by no means are we saying we aren't sinful or that we don't have blind spots. I listened to Chad Workhoven this morning, and he talks about he needs people. He needs people on some of the sides that have been disciplined through this synod to help him see his blind spots. We want them here. However, at the essence of who we are and what we are as members of the Christian Reformed Church, this synod was a historic moment in bringing us fully on that track, I'll say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't remember where I heard this. I wish I could give this person credit, but I think I was listening to somebody or talking to somebody who was mentioning, since the 90s, I mean, it began when the big URC split, we lost a bunch of members, but the CRC's been dropping numbers ever since the 90s, right? And they were pointing out that their solution to that problem was, okay, we need to gain members, and the way to gain members is to broaden our scope and to become more evangelical. If we're just more like everybody else, then we'll bring more people in, right? And you can see that in the number of Christian Reformed churches who changed their names to Community Church, in which my church is called Faith Community. I added Christian Reformed Church to make sure that we don't remember that. But my church was one of those that tried to make that move to become more evangelical, to become more whatever, trying to increase members. And guess what? It didn't work. And so that kind of flows into, I think, some of what has just happened over the last few years is this movement, or the fruit of, I think, faithful discipleship, as I've been saying. People are saying, no, we don't want to be just broadly evangelical. We want to be Christian Reformed because that's who we are. And I think, and this isn't why we do these things. I think we make these decisions because we're trying to honor God in our denomination. But I also think in the cultural moment that we're in, people are looking for people who say, here's who we are, take it or leave it, right? And so like the generation coming up sees this kind of broadly like, well, we all kind of agree on stuff. They see that as inauthentic and hypocritical. They actually appreciate someone who says, here's where I stand, take it or leave it. Now, they might get angry at you. They might hate you for that, but they do appreciate you more for just taking a stand on something and saying, here's who we are.
Your drum of clarity was pounded many a time at this synod. I will say that.
I found great joy in it. I should have taken tallies of it.
The second clerk should have been doing that.
Oh, yeah. Aren't you supposed to take those notes?
I'm sorry.
To the point that you're speaking to, the thing that I love about our creeds and confessions so much is that we don't just have denials, what we're against, we have affirmations, what we are for. And you can only come to those resolutions by understanding how God has spoken clearly. I'll just keep harping on it as well. Mm-hmm. And when we say we're reformed according to the Word of God, and we say our creeds and confessions are summaries of what the Word of God rightly teaches, then you will inevitably end up with affirmations and denials. Yep. So that's part of why I love this denomination so much. It's not just what are we pitting ourselves against, it's what are we going to stand for. And we stand for the truth of God's word.
Yeah. And this is something I hinted at in an episode, I don't remember, one of the recent ones, maybe the last one, my reflection on Synod. And it's something I'm going to write on soon. And I'm might even record another podcast on something that's really been gripping me lately, is recognizing that catechisms in particular are missional. And most people don't think of them that way. They think of them as discipleship tools, but I actually think they're missional for the reason that you two both were saying. Because what makes a message easily spread and easily grab hold of people, right? It's clarity. Having a clear, compelling message is what, right? It spreads, right? That's if you're speaking not clearly and there's fog, that message doesn't go anywhere. But if you have a clear, compelling message, it spreads. People can grab hold of it and take it and run with it. And that's what catechisms do. They give you a clear, compelling message, not only that applies to you in your walk with Christ, but it actually gives you the language and words to speak to people about your faith, to share the gospel with them. And so clarity actually is a missional thing, and it gives you the opportunity to share the gospel, right? And so, like, you can imagine talking to someone who's trying to figure out where their only now, obviously nobody's going to say, where is my only comfort in life and in death? But you know, when you're with somebody who's wrestling with their comfort, they're suffering, they're struggling, they're trying to figure out, how do I find comfort in this? You know, you can come and say something quick, right? My only comfort in life and in death is that I'm not my own, but belong to my faithful Savior, Jesus Christ, right? Body and soul, and life and in death. I find comfort in that. And like, that's really clear and that's really compelling. And catechisms actually equip our people to do that.
Yeah, you hit on I don't know. Yeah, it was like 3 months ago. You were on a discipleship drum, to bring up another drum of yours, Jason. You were nailing on discipleship, and that is, I think, what we've seen. You know, from hearing from delegates on the floor about, you know, they didn't grow up in the CRC, but they came to this denomination because of their beliefs, because of what they read the Bible saying, and how they see that applying to life. You know, being more CRC than Alvin Plantinga, stuff like that comes off the floor. All of that is, you know, and people have gone through, right? They've gone through processes where they say, no, like, I adamantly disagree with the CRC's belief, and yet they're discipled into coming to realize, oh no, like, what the CRC holds to is what the Bible says. And so there is, you know, again, discipline comes out of discipleship. Those two work together. However, that missional discipleship certainly is part of what our confessions are intended to be, or what they've morphed into, and should be the application of them in today's church.
Yeah, and so that's some of maybe a hint at one of my things coming up on why the decisions that were just made at 2024, I think, will actually set us up to reach the lost better and more effectively be witnesses in our current cultural situation.
So, Dan, given your service at Synod, what did you learn about yourself? And I'm going to specify, what did you learn about yourself serving as an officer? I mean, you've mentioned this was your third Synod. You've gone 2 other times as a delegate. But what did you learn about yourself as you were elected to serve Synod 2024, the historic Synod, as an officer for that Synod?
That's a great question. I think being willing to trust God, obviously as a delegate, that's important, you know, regardless of how it is. But as an officer, I mean, again, you're hearing how things are coming in. You come in with a preconceived idea of how the Synod is going to go. Again, Jason's been optimistic the last 2 years, and I think you were still optimistic heading into this year about 70, 75%, 74 point whatever percent these votes have been getting. I was not optimistic. I was not optimistic at all heading into the Synod. And to see the numbers continue to be out there and to say again, wow, like this is where the CRC is. Like, so even as I talk about it and I'm like praising this group of people that has faithfully stayed in the CRC or come into the CRC and persevered despite, the odds that are out there, to see what's happening kind of behind the scenes and think, man, this could really be a mess. And then have it work out. I mean, and to that end too, I mean, stuff like trusting God beyond just votes. Tuesday morning, I'll give a little bit of backroom information. Like I would say Monday night, Tuesday morning. I mean, as officers, we were scratching our heads saying like, wow, last year is about to happen again. There's too much work. There's no way we are getting done. And then you get to the end of the Tuesday, and I mean, we got through a ton of stuff on Tuesday, but you're like, oh wow, like this could actually work out. Like I was pulling tabs off of my book, and I'm like, most of these are gone. Like, and the biggest group was left to, I think it was Committee 2 that we dealt with the main portion of their stuff that had all the protests on the final day, and it was like, wow, like this is all going to be dealt with in one big chunk. And so like just the need to trust God. I mean, that's a constant thing in my life that I like. I do. I tend to doubt God, even though He's proved Himself time and time again to be faithful, to be willing to answer. But I think too, like along with that, the number of people that were in prayer and that were encouraging to the clerks as well. I mean, like you guys said before, like the president, vice president, they're the ones up there. Everyone knows what they're doing. They don't know what the clerks are doing, but we were still, we received a lot of appreciation throughout the week. And so, but I think what I grew in the most was, having to trust God when it seems like there's absolutely no way things are going to work out.
That's all we have for this week. If you want to help us out and support the Messy Reformation, another thing you can do is sign up for our newsletter through Substack. That way, you'll get episodes and summaries sent directly to your email inbox. It will also give us the opportunity to communicate with our audience, which is one of the biggest struggles of a podcast. So head over to the Messy Reformation on Substack and sign up for our newsletter. But until then, don't forget this is Christ's church, and He bought it with His blood. And we've been warned that wolves will come in trying to destroy the flock. So, keep a close watch on your life and on your doctrine. Preach the word in season and out of season. And keep fighting the good fight in this messy Reformation.